Welcome to the NIE ICMR WHO online course for ethics committees. Now, you actually would be wondering what is all this about international guidelines, why should we know about that? But you should know about this when you get proposals which are part of international collaborative research. So, unless you have a background about what guidelines are available, at least be sensitized about it. It will be not that very useful for you if you are going to review such proposals which have international collaborative flavor. The learning objective of this session would be to recognize guidelines published by international bodies for biomedical and health research. If you look at the international guidelines, the first and foremost that comes to mind is the Nuremberg Code in 1947. And then the other international document which is very important is the Declaration of Helsinki, which was first released in 1964 and it had undergone 7 revisions and the last one was released in 2013. We also have another very important document called the Belmont Report in 1979, which actually was a reaction to what happened in US about the Tuskegee trial. We will come to that a little while later. And then you see the 3 bullets in blue. The NBAC report, that is National Bioethics Advisory Committee report of US, the document by Nuffield Council of UK and COMS, which is an offshoot of WHO, all speaking about the developing country perspectives. This is from 2001 to 2002 and recently we had a revision of the COMS guidelines in 2016. So, this was a development where the West realized that the 90% of research that is being done in developing countries has to be approached in a different way, considering that the culture and customs of these regions are different from the very individualistic approach of the Western countries. Now, when it comes to the regulatory clinical trials, the most important document is the International Council for Harmonization Good Clinical Practice guideline, which we call in short the ICH-GCP guidelines. It was released in 1996 and it was revised last year and it is called R2. We should not forget, because you are all ethics committee members, that there is another WHO publication, the WHO's operational guidelines for ethics committees that review biomedical research, which was released in 2000. Now, this is an important document for us Indians also, because the first revision of the ICMR guidelines in 2000 actually had borrowed ideas from this particular guidelines in order to guide our own ethics committees. Now, this was revised in 2011. Now, when we talk of international guidelines, we also need to talk a little about the Indian guidelines. I had already told you that in 1979 we had the Belmont report. Just 1 year later we have had ICMR has actually released the first guidelines on biomedical research, followed by 3 revisions 2000, 2006 and 2017, the last one being released just recently on 12th October. Now, for the regulatory clinical trials, Indian GCP came out in 2001 and one should remember that this was based on the ICH-GCP, the international document, but it also had a lot of matter picked up from the 2000 ICMR guidelines. So, then we come to the stem cell research and here the first guideline that was released was in 2007, revised in 2013 and again 2017 it was released on 11th October. On 12th October we had another guideline released for research on children. Keeping all this in mind, people may ask where is the where are the teeth when you want to apply the guidelines. So, where is the law behind that? So, one should remember that these have an indirect mandate, and that is through the Indian Medical Council Act, which was revised in which was amended in 2002 as the Professional Conduct, Etiquette and Ethics Amendment. In 2005, we had the Schedule Y of Drugs and Cosmetics Act coming out. So, they are actually mandated through that if the investigator actually if the physician who becomes an investigator violates the ICMR guidelines, then they were supposed to be punished for that. Now, you would understand that the Drugs and Cosmetics Act is getting revised because it is going to actually include clinical trials, which was not described earlier in the Act. So, punishments are going to be much more. Now, when we talk of direct mandate, it is the Drugs and Cosmetics Act rules 1945 with its amendments, and these amendments actually got released with quick succession from 2013 onwards and brought out significant changes in how an ethics committee should review, what an ethics committee should do, how ethics committee should get registered and so on. So, the burden of the ethics committees have increased quite a bit in order to protect the research participants. Now, earlier if you look in 1990s when the doors were opened for foreign investment, a lot of clinical trial also came to India. Now, it was supposed to be participant centered, but that was not the case despite the foreign requirements were to abide by the Nuremberg Code and Declaration of Helsinki. There was not proper global justice in the way research was being conducted in developing countries. There was a sort of ethical imperialism, like being dictated by the foreign partner about how we should go about research, that we are not actually equipped enough to understand the intricacies. So, they have to tell us how to go about it. There were certain plus points as well as there were negative points as well. Now, what is meant by ethics dumping? You would be wondering what this is. So, the point is that what cannot be done in developed country is being thrust upon countries which had no way of refusing such studies coming to their countries because of the funding that was coming behind that. So, that is in other ways we could say it is ethics dumping. Nuremberg, coming to the first code that I had mentioned, the Nuremberg Code, that was a result of the Nuremberg trial on atrocities committed by the doctors during the Nazi regime, and therefore, a lot of importance was given to the participant empowerment. So, this was in the form of insisting that informed consent should be taken and the participant should be given the freedom to withdraw any time during the trial period. There was also a lot of importance given to investigators' responsibility. So, the moment the investigator finds that there is more harm coming to the participant, either it could be either he or she could stop that trial or at least withdraw the participant from that particular study. Coming to Declaration of Helsinki, we had the revision 7 times as I had told you earlier, 75, 83, 89, 2000, 2004, 2008 and 2013. Instead of trying to describe what each year highlighted, it is enough for the ethics committees to understand that these declarations actually brought out into importance the issues concerning standard of care, placebo, post trial access to therapy, inclusion in trial registry, publication of negative results and compensation. There was a lot of debate on standard of care and placebo issues, and I think probably it may not get resolved even in near future unless you read through the articles that have been described in this declaration. Now, post trial access also became a little difficult for pharma companies especially, but as far as possible the ethics committees are supposed to look into this matter when they review every proposal. It is important for regulatory clinical trials to register in the in some registry, whether it is clinical trial registry, clinicaltrial.gov which is US based, or it is in the clinical trial registry of India which is linked to the WHO registry, but it has more fields there, so more information there. Now, when it comes to publication of negative results, there was a lot of resistance from US FDA because the pharma company did not want to do this for obvious reasons. So, the US FDA stated that it will not follow the Declaration of Helsinki, but abide by good clinical practice. Now, the compensation issue, this was a topic which was much discussed in India, much ahead of what it has been documented later, and this was also discussed in US at that time, which did not have a mechanism to have this compensation given to participants of all research that was happening in US. So, however, because of the discussions that were happening in India, it caught the attention, and the declaration actually highlighted a paragraph on compensation. So, for the first time it got actually incorporated into an international document. Now, UNESCO also made 3 main declarations, one in 1997 on human genome and human rights, another one in 2003 about genetic data, human genetic data, and in 2005 it concentrated on bioethics and its relationship to human rights. Coming to the event which led to the formulation of Belmont report, it was the Tuskegee syphilis study, where for 40 years research was conducted on poor African American men who suffered from syphilis. They were not treated, and the study was on the natural course of the disease, and when this became a public information, there was a lot of uproar among the US public, and as a result of that there was an act on research, biomedical and behavioral research, followed by a document called the Belmont report 7 years later, which highlighted 3 main principles: respect for persons, beneficence and justice. Now, the fourth one, non-maleficence, was added to it much later. Respect for persons means it is about how you administer informed consent to the participant. Beneficence is actually weighing the benefit risk ratio of the particular proposal, taking care that as far as possible the participant should not be subjected to much risk. Now, non-maleficence is the other side of the coin, by trying to concentrate that not much harm is done to the participant. Justice is about how you select your participants. Are you justified in including a particular group in a study? If at all there is equitable distribution of burden or benefits, that also has to be seen by the ethics committees. Now, just a mention about Guatemala trial, because it has a relevance to what the US has done recently, undergone a big exercise to change their common rules, which was actually initiated in 1991. they had the first revision only recently because of this particular trial. There was this Dr. Cutler who went from US to this third world country Guatemala along with the US forces which liberated the country, and he actually infected prisoners, soldiers, sex workers, mentally incapacitated people and orphans, and this you know very well that this is a highly vulnerable group. More than 1300 people were actually tried for this trial, and the main thing was how to transmit syphilis through sexual or direct contact. No treatment was given, and this gentleman, he after these 2 years of study, he went to the Tuskegee study. What I want to highlight here is that we talk about Nuremberg Code in 1947, which was made by the Americans. Unfortunately, the longest paragraph in that code on informed consent was totally forgotten when this project was initiated by the US Public Health Service Department. So, when it came to light in in 2010, around that time, in 2011, President Obama asked its Bioethics Commission to study this whole thing in depth and see what exactly was the nature of the study, and also he asked the commission whether our common rule, which was initiated in 1991, needs revision now, and also to see how the American studies in non-US sites would be compliant to the local regulations. So, this was the exercise done, and as a result now we have it was started in 2011, and now we see a major change to the common rules used by US. So, in some ways, some of the requirements there do not match with the Indian requirements. So, as ethics committees, you will have to see whether your proposals actually match, and if they do not match, what will prevail would be the lands, our country's requirements. Now, if you see the present developments in global research, you can see a shift from the individual to the community, and also more stress is laid on the post trial access. Wherever possible, the ethics committees are now getting more and more aware about this particular aspect, and they are asking, they are demanding. But I also see that many ethics committees are not even aware of this. There has to be a lot of transparency, and distributive justice is actually demanded now on an equal partnership platform. So, this is what we actually need to do in the present times, and the present guidelines released by ICMR in 2017 actually has major changes, and I would actually recommend you to go through the portion on the collaborative research part of the section on responsible conduct of research. With that, I thank you for your patient listening.